Masechet Kiddushin Daf Samech Aleph. The Mishnah mentioned the case of Almenat sheyesh li b'makom peloni im yesh lo. A man says to a wife, "Haret mikudeshet li," on condition that I have a piece of land in this particular place. If he has land in that particular place, then the Kiddushin is valid. If he has land but it's in a different place, then the Kiddushin is not valid. So we ask, B'shita, isn't this obvious? Did you fulfill the condition or not? Why does Mishnah mention this? Ma'odetema amala ma'nafkalach mina. Ana tarachna umaitina kamashmatlan. I might have thought that the Kiddushin would be valid even if the land was in a different place, because the guy could tell her, what difference does it make to you if the land that I have is here or there? It's producing fruits and vegetables, so what does it matter if it's closer or farther away? Let's say it's farther away. I'll do the extra work to bring the fruit to you. Doesn't matter to you. You have this income, you have this, coming to you as part of the marriage. I own it, and so I'll do the extra work if it's farther away and you wanted it closer. That's why the Mishnah has to teach that. Not so. The guy can't say that. She can say, I got married to you, assuming on condition that this was a piece of land in this particular place that was close by, or for whatever reason she wants it there. And if it's not there, he doesn't have land in this place, he has other land farther away, she has a right to say that she would not have gotten married with that, based on that. So therefore the condition is particular, and only if it's in that place is the Kiddushin valid. The next case in the Mishnah is Menashe ech bet kod afar. The guy says to her, I'm married to you on condition that I will show you a piece of land that is the size of a bet kod, it can produce a cord of grain. Tana. Now, so if he shows it to her, then that's fine. Otherwise, not. Tana lo nitkavena zo ela lirot mishelo. So first of all, he can't just show her a random piece of land. Look here, I showed you a piece of land. He has to own it, because that's what the meaning is. All right, she intended that the land, when she agreed to this condition, she intended that he owns this land. The Mishnah continues and says, if he shows her some random land in a valley that he doesn't own, the Kiddushin is not good. Isn't that obvious? It's coming to include that, let's say he is a sharecropper. The guy, the groom, is a sharecropper on the land. He's not the main owner of the land, but he does have a share in it. He works the land and he can keep part of it. That does not count. He has to be an actual owner. Like if I do Kiddushin with woman, I say on condition that I own Amazon. And then she says, okay, do you own Amazon? She says, well, I own 10 shares of Amazon. That's not good enough. You have to actually own the majority of the company to say that I am the owner. And here too, just being a sharecropper on the land does not count. Hagabe hekdesh tenan. Okay, now we're going to go on a lengthy question about if he shows her, let's say, land, that's a bet cord. It's a bet cord big, but on the land is not all equally arable. There's some holes in it. There's rocks in it that are raised up and low down. Do you count those as part of the bet cord or not? So first we're going to bring two other cases, hekdesh and sale of land, where we'll discuss. In one case, you do count that unarable land. In another case, you don't count that unarable land. And then we're going to come back and ask regarding this type of case of Kiddushin. And the bet cord is, let's say, 90% good land, but 10% has holes and rocks and things. So does that count as a bet cord and the condition is fulfilled or not? So let's see first the other laws. Gabe hekdesh tenan. Mishnah Narachin regarding hekdesh says, Hamakdisha b'shat yovel noten bezerach chomes seorim 50 shekel kesef. If someone consecrates his field in a jubilee year, this is when the yovel was observed. So normally when you make hekdesh, to say something as hekdesh, like if one would do a field at other times when the yovel does not, then it would just, you have to pay the value of the land. But there's a special halacha in the Torah that when the yovel is in force, then for every bet cord of land, one pays 50 shekel kesef. Chomet is the same as a cord. of barley. So yeah, if I say this piece of land, I want to make hekdesh, I have to pay 50 shekel kesef per kor. היו נקעים עמוקים 10 טבחים, או סלעים גבוהים 10 טבחים, הם נמדדים עמה. פחות מכאן, נמדדים עמה. If it had crevices that are 10 tefachim deep, about 30 or so inches deep, or boulders 10 tefachim high, you don't count that in the calculation of the bet kor. But if it's less than 10 tefachim high or 10 tefachim deep, then they are considered part of the land, right? Because land it doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but these big things make it very hard to grow things equally on it. Now, on that Mishnah, we discussed it. Understand that it will not be included in the bet kor for the purpose of calculating how much of the 50 shekel I have to bring. But why not? Why is it not consecrated by itself on its own? Take all the pieces of land that are rocks, that are rocky, or that have crevices, and count those separately, and just pay for the value of that land. Of those pieces, right? Why don't we do that? And if you'll say, well, maybe it doesn't add up to bet kor. And so right now we're thinking that if you have less than a bet kor, then you pay nothing. And so all those things added up would not be a bet kor. But that's not true, because urminhu. And I'm going to look at the pasuk here first. The teacher is Vim Sedeh Mi Sedeh Achuzato Yakdish Ish LaHadonai V'Erkach Lefi Zar'o Zera Homes Seorim B'Chamishim Shekel Kasef. So here's where we get that number, the 50 shekel. That's for Homed Seorim, which is the same as a cord. But the pasuk also has this extra word Im Misedeh Achuzato from the field, from even part of the field. So we ask in this midrash, Sadeh matamod omar. Why does it say the word Sadeh? So it already says in the rest of the pasuk this amount, right? A piece of land that can grow a chomed, which is a cord, that you have to pay 50 shekel. So I know that if I make hekdesh, that size of a field, I'm going to have to pay the 50 shekel. What about a smaller piece? How do I know that I would have to pay proportionally, right? If it was half of a cord, then I would have to pay 25, and so on. How do you know that you have to pay a ratio even of a part of it? So the word sedeh comes to say, yes, in any case, no matter what, you have to pay amount on even a smaller amount of the field. So therefore, back to our original question, I might understand that these rocks and clefts are not going to be included when measuring the arable land, but why don't I have to pay their value separately? And the answer is because here we're dealing with crevices that are filled with water, and you can't sow them at all. You can't plant anything where it's growing water. And actually this makes sense because we're comparing it to the boulders, and boulders that are right this high up, you can't grow anything on top of a rock. And so this is talking about land that's really not usable, and that's why it doesn't count. Okay, back to the question. Wait a second. If it's really not arable at all, then even lower than that, it should not count to make up the 50. So no. If it's less than 10 tefachim high, or these crevices less than tefachim deep, then that's just called cracks in the ground or the spine of the ground, meaning that's part of the natural topography of the land. The land, it goes up and down, it has bumps. Has little valleys. That's just, you can't expect the land to be perfectly straight. So all that is included, even though it's a little rocky here and a little bumpy there. That's included in the measurement. So the summary of this part regarding hekdesh is that if it's small bumps and clefts that are less than 10 tefachim, those are included. If it's a big bump, more than 10 tefachim, it's not included. If it's a deep crevice, more than 10 tefachim, and it's filled with water, then it's not included. But if it's empty, right, so even though it's deeper than 10 tefachim, but it's not filled with water, that is included in the calculation. That's the key part, that's the key feature here regarding Hekdesh, a deep valley that it does not have water, a deep crevice that does not have water, is included in the calculation. That will contrast with a sale. If I regarding a sale, the Mishnah Baba Batra says, if I say I'm going to sell you a bet cord of earth, so you have a bet cord here, but there are crevices that are more than 10 tefachim deep, or rocks that are more than 10 tefachim high, these do not count towards it. You say, I don't want that. If it's less than that, that's part of the topography, so there's bumps, and you have to accept it. Now, Mordechai said about this Mishnah, says, even if the crevices do not have water in it, and they're more than 10 tefachim, they do not count. Why? Because a person does not want to pay money for one field, and now it looks like it's 2 or 3 fields. In other words, if you have these big holes, even if they don't have water in it, and so you could go and plant in it, but you look at it and you see, oh, it looks like 2 fields because it has this big hole right down the middle. And so a person doesn't want to pay a certain, whatever amount of money he's paying for 2 fields. He wants it to be 1 field and look like 1 field and be all together without these big holes. Okay, so now we ask, Hacha Mai, what about Kiddushin? Is it like Hekdesh, where large crevices that don't have water are counted within the bet cord? Or is it like a sale where large crevices that don't have water are not counted in the sale? In the case of Kiddushin, I promised this bride that I have a bet cord of land, and I have exactly a bet cord, but it has these large crevices without water in it. Is it included like in Hekdesh, or not or do I not include that measurement like in a sale? And that'll make a difference if the Kiddushin is valid or invalid. And the answer is like Desh midaminan la or lemeche midaminan la is the question. Mistabera like Desh midaminan la damar la ana tarachna vezarana umaitina. And the answer is it makes sense that it would be more like Hekdesh, and we would include that, and so therefore the Kiddushin would be valid. Let's say if it was exactly a bet cord, including those deep crevices without water, and because the man could say to her, listen, it's extra work to plant and that land and bring you that have to take the plow and go down there and come back up. So yes, it's more work. I'll do the extra work. That's on me, and I'll bring you the same yield, the same fruits, the same vegetables. We will get to you. So I'll take the extra effort upon myself, and that's why we will count that extra work. Next Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol Tanai She'eno Ketanai B'nei Gad U'Bnei Reuven, Eno Tanai Shneimar, Ve'omer Alehem Im Ya'avru B'nei Gad U'Bnei Reuven, U'chtiv Im Lo Ya'avru Halusim. Rabbi Meir says, anytime you make a condition in all of halacha, the condition has to be like the conditions that Moshe made with the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuven. Where it says, Moshe told them, if you Gad and Reuven, come with us into the land of Israel and help us conquer the land of Israel, then yes, you can have your request and you can settle the land on the eastern side of the Jordan. That's the positive side. But then Moshe goes on and says, Ve'im lo ya'avru halusim, if you do not come armed and help us with the land, help us conquer the land, then you cannot go ahead and inherit the land outside the land of Israel. So this is said in a positive and a negative. So the Rabbi Meir teaches that every condition that one makes has to be said like this, in a positive and a negative. If you just say the positive without the negative part, then it's not a valid condition. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Omer Sarich hadavar leomro shilmale ken yesh b'mashma shafilu be'eretz Kenan lo yinhalu. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, however, disagrees with Rabbi Meir, and he says no. Normally, a condition, even just one part of it, is valid. In this case, with Gad and Reuven, Moshe had to specify this, because if he didn't specify it, then it would sound like that, listen, if you come into the land with us, then you'll get that part outside. And if you just stop there, it would sound like if you don't come in and settle the land with us, then you will get nothing, not even in the land of Israel. And that's not true, right? Really, the negative is, if you don't come into the land with us, then you won't be able to get the land on the other side of the Jordan, but you will still be able to get the land within Eretz Canaan. Let's look at the Pesukim inside so we can see this clearly. Moshe tells them, if all the fighters of Gan Reuben go into the Jordan with everybody else to fight Lifnei Hashem, and they subdue the land with you, then they can get Gilad, meaning on the eastern side of the Jordan. But if they don't fulfill their promise, and they don't come in with you to conquer the land, then they will receive land within Canaan. So you have to say that. If you don't say the second sentence, then it sounds like, listen, if you go in with them, then you'll get the land on the other side of the Jordan. Now, if you stop there, it sounds like, and then if you don't, that means you get no land at all. You don't get that land in the Jordan, you get zero. So here, he had to clarify about Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel said, it's necessary to have the negative so that you don't think that they get no land at all. But this is not a proof that in general, you need to have both the positive and the negative. All right, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara asks, Shapir Kamar le Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel le Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel is making a good point. You actually need it. In this case, Amalach Rabbi Meir, Isa kadatech lav litnai kaful hu de'ata, lichtovim lo ya'avru v'nochezu betochechem. Beres Canaan lamali. So no, if there was only to make the point, if this pasuk was not teaching us that you need a positive and a negative in general, and it was only teaching you in this case that they will get land in Israel, then the pasuk could have simply said, and if they don't get it, then v'nochezu betochechem, they will receive a possession amongst you. You don't need to add the words and in Eretz Canaan. In other words, right here, v'nochezu betochechem, period. And I would know that. You have extra words here, and so those extra words come to teach me something else. Lamali, shema mina litnai kaful hu de'ata. They come to teach me that not only here, but in general, we need both a positive and a negative. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Amar, Ila ketiv rachamana be'eretz Canaan havimina benochezu betochechem be'eretz Gilad, aval eretz Canaan kelal lo. Rabbi Chanina responds that there are no extra words in this pasuk to learn that you need a double tanai, because if the pasuk did not say the words Eretz Canaan, and if it just said Nochezu betochechem, if you don't come in, then they will receive a portion among you, then I would have thought that that portion among you is a piece of Eretz Gilad, but in Eretz Canaan they would get nothing. In other words, if we look back at the pasuk, if it stopped here betochechem, I would have thought as follows: Moshe is saying, if you come in, then you get the entire Gilad. If you fight with us, you get the entire Gilad. If you don't fight with us, then you will get a piece within Gilad. Right, but nothing in Eretz Canaan. You'll just get a little piece of Gilad within you. So therefore, I need Eretz Canaan to teach me that if they don't go in, then they get a regular piece of land within Eretz Canaan, but they won't get the special land that they requested, the entirety of Gilad. So therefore, I need Eretz Canaan for the very context. In this case, it's not extra. To that, Rabbi Meir responds, Rabbi Meir, betochechem kol echad itlechu mashma. No, betochechem means everywhere. Betochechem means everywhere, meaning including in the land of Canaan. So even if I just had until here betochechem, if you don't go in, then you get betochechem within the entirety of the land that all the other tribes get, which is in Eretz Canaan itself. So I know that without Eretz Canaan, and therefore the words Eretz Canaan are extra to teach me that every Tanai needs a double positive and a negative. Okay, so far so good. Now we have a Baraita. Tanya. Amar Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. He wants to give a parable to another case where we can parse this language and see what it really is supposed to mean. And show that there's no extra words here. You need this whole sentence. Amar Peloni beni irash sadeh pelonit, ufloni beni irash sadeh pelonit, ufloni beni yiten 200 zuz, virash sadeh pelonit, vim lo yiten yirash imecha bish'ar nechasim. Let's say you have a father who wants to decide his will, and he says to my son A, he will get this particular field. Good. And to my next son, son B, he will get that particular field. And to my third son C, if he pays 200 zuz, he can get this particular field. Maybe that field is a very good field, and so he should pay in and to the pot, to the other brothers, in order to get this very good field. So if he chooses to, if he does that, and if he doesn't pay, then he'll get a equal share with the other brothers. So you see that there's a positive and a negative. Now, mi garam lo lirashimecha bishar nechasim kefelo garam lo. What would give him the right, if he doesn't pay, to get a share with the other brothers? Only because of the extra statement, vim lo, the negative part of it. In other words, if you just stopped here and you said, this the third son, if he pays, he'll get that field, and we stop there, then we would assume if he doesn't pay, then he gets nothing at all, right? So that would be a problem. So he needs to add. This is not just a double language for the sake of parallelism, or to say yes and a no, right? To have kefel lashon, this is actually needed for the consequence, right? Because it'll make a big difference, and so he has to add that, so that if he doesn't pay, then he gets an equal share with the rest. And so this is a demonstration of the fact that with Moshe also, if Moshe didn't say, only said the positive, if you go fight, then you get this land in Gilad. So if you stop there, that would imply, and if you don't fight, then you don't get any land. So you need to say the negative. If you don't fight, you still get land, and in Canaan. All right, so that's a demonstration using a parable. Now we ask, the parable is not quite the same as our Mishnah. Hatam ketani yesh b'mashma shafilu be'eretz Canaan lo yinchalu, alma kefela le'eretz Gilad name mehane. In the case of the Mishnah, it says that without the second clause, then they would not get any part of Eretz Canaan either, right? Even in Eretz Canaan. The even in Eretz Canaan sounds like, and not in the Eretz Gilad either, right? In other words, without that second clause, the second clause there says, and if you don't go in, then you will get Eretz Canaan. Without that, we would assume they get nothing at all, right? So once again, in the Mishnah, Moshe says, if you come into the land, you get the land of Eretz Gilad. And if you stop there without the second clause, then we would assume that, and if you don't come in, then you get nothing, not in Gilad, and not in Eretz Canaan. So that's the case in the Mishnah. Without the second clause, you get nothing at all. Whereas in the Braita, the Mashal is different. In the parable, it says, who allowed the third son to get a portion with his with the other brothers altogether. It's the second if not clause. Therefore without that double language, the rest of the portions he would get in any case. In other words, in the parable, let's say the father just said, you get son A gets parcel A, son B gets parcel B, son C, if he pays, then he gets parcel C, and he stops there and didn't say anything further. Then I would assume that the third son still gets, if he doesn't pay, then the third son will still get a third of parcel C. So now we see a mismatch between the mashal and the nimshal. In the original case of the Mishnah, without a second clause, the Gad and Reuven would get nothing at all. Whereas in the mashal, without that second clause, he would at least get part of parcel C. So if we read that back into the Nimshal, then it should be that without the second clause, Gad and Reuven would still get part of the Gilad. But that's not what we said it means beforehand. So we conclude, we answer la kashya. Hamikame dene male Rabbi Meir v'nochazu. Ha lebata dene male Rabbi Meir v'nochazu. The Mishnah was talking about the stage of the conversation before the Rabbi Meir counteracted and said, oh no, you could have just stopped at v'nochazu betochechem. You don't need the words Eres Kenaan. And so at that point, Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel was assuming that if you leave off the second clause, then they would get nothing at all. And so that's the simple reading of the Mishnah. Whereas the parable actually is coming after the conversation that we saw, the follow-up conversation between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel, where Rabbi Meir says, wait a second, all I need is v'nochezu betochechem. That would have been enough to teach me that if they don't come in, they get a piece in Eretz Canaan. The words Eretz Canaan are extra. And to that, Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel responded that, no, if you didn't have those words, then I would still think that they get a portion within Eretz Gilad, right? A small portion together with everybody else. I need Eretz Canaan to teach me that they would also get a portion in the regular land of Canaan. So it's at that stage, when after that stage, that Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel gave the parable now it is parallel, because without the words Eretz Canaan, I would assume, yes, they would get a piece in the land of Gilad at least, and that's equal to the parable where without the if not clause, then the third son would at least get a piece of parcel C. So now that we understand that the mashal is comparing to after the conversation, that it is equal, whereas the Mishnah was assuming before that follow-up conversation. Next, we are going to ask a series of questions against Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel. Remember again, Rabbi Meir says you always require in every Tanai a double language, positive and negative, and Rabbi Hanina says you don't. So here's a few challenges. Bishlam al Rabbi Meir hanu dichtiv im tetiv se'et im lo tetiv lapeta chatat robes pashat hashavua. After Cain kills Hebel, Hashem tells Cain, listen, don't be so depressed. If you do better, if you make teshuvah, then you'll be lifted up. You're right, and you'll be okay. And if you don't do better, make teshuvah, then sin crouches at the door. So you see, you have a double language. Hashem uses a double language, positive and negative. Why? Why bother? Just say im tetiv se'et, and I can figure out. And if not, then we can figure out the rest. No, I need the double language in this case, because if I only had the positive, I would say if you do positive se'et, then you'll get reward, and if not, then you'll get nothing, not reward and not judgment. Therefore, I need the second part to teach me that. And if you don't do good, if you don't get better, if you don't do better, then not only will you not get reward, you'll get sin, you'll get punishment. And so that's why over here, I need the negative for its content, not just for the form. Next question. According to Rabbi Meir, it makes sense. This is where Avraham tells Eved Avraham, you should go and get a wife for my son, go back to my homeland, right? And if you do it correctly, that's how you fulfill the oath that I'm giving you. Ki tavod mishpachti. That's the positive side. If the family decides not to give you the girl, and they refuse, then you are cleansed of this oath. All right, because you tried your best and you weren't able to do it. This formulation of the oath is the way that Eved Avraham repeats it later on. Earlier in the Perek, is where where Avraham first tells the Eved Avraham. So, but now we're focusing on this formulation. And so, according to Rabbi Hanina, why does he have to say the not part of it? Just say, right, if you do that, then this is the right thing. This is the way I want to do it. And I can figure out that if he's not able to do it, then not. Istadir sakadatecha min hechad nicha la ledida vela nicha ledidhu maite ba'al korchaihu kamash malan. No, without that clause, I might have thought that as long as the girl herself is willing to go, even if the family is not willing to go, Eved Avraham should go and force her and just, kidnap her against the wishes of the family, and he has to do that for the oath. Therefore, in order to say that's not so, the pasuk needs to say, listen, if the family doesn't agree, then you don't have to, right? Don't kidnap her. So that's why I need that. Okay, now in the original formulation, back in the beginning of the Perek, Abraham actually says here, go and find a wife for my son from there. And then he adds, ve'im lo, if lo toveh ha'isha. And this time it says, if the girl doesn't want to go, then you are cleansed of this vow. Now, actually, in context, you can understand the difference, why Eved Avraham changed this a bit. You see, in the original, Avraham says, make sure the girl wants to go. But now, the second time, Eved Avraham is talking to the family and trying to convince the family, please let her go. So he's saying, listen, you have to let her go, right? Otherwise, I can't do it. Okay, so, anyway, we do have the second formulation. So we ask about that. Why do we need the negative formulation according to you, Rabbi Chanina, in this case? I might think that if the family is okay with it, even if she's not okay with it, then you have to go and grab her against her wishes, because that's part of the oath. And therefore, this formulation teaches not so. If she doesn't want to go herself, then you also are exempt. So the both formulations together mean that both the girl and the family have to want her, have to agree that she can go. According to Bimeir, I understand why at the end of Vayikra, where it has the blessings and the curses, has a positive and negative. If you do the commandments, then you get blessing. And if you don't do the commandments, then you get punishment. Right? So I need both. Because Rabbi Meir says you always need the double formulation. Why? Why not just say the one side of it? Because I might have thought, if you only have one side, the positive side, I might have thought that if you do the commandments, you get blessing. And if you don't, then you get nothing, no blessing and no curse. Therefore, I need the second side to say, and if you don't, then you're going to get all these curses, which is in fact, in the context, you see, that's followed by all those curses. Im tovu ushmatem v'gomed, im tema'anu umritem. In Yeshaya, it says, if you're willing and obedient, then you'll have the good of the land. And if you refuse and rebel, then you will be devoured by the sword. So you see a positive and negative. That makes sense for the Bimeir. You need it. But why does Rabbi Chanina need the positive and negative? Again, here, if it only had the positive, I would think that if you do the positive, you get good, and if you refuse, then you get nothing, not good and not bad. So therefore, I need the second clause to teach me that if you do negative, then you get punishment. And now, just a clarification: my cherev teukelu. What does that mean that you will be devoured by the sword? In the simple pashat, it's easy to understand. Cherev, you will be eaten or consumed by a sword. An enemy will come with swords and destroy you and kill you. Teukelu means to consume or to destroy by a sword. But it seems that Rava is reading it not as teukelu, but tochelu. You'll eat a sword. What are we talking about? Sword eaters? The people that do that magic trick? Amar Rava, milcha gelalnita nahama desare akusha besaleh amar mor pat purne hareba bemelech b'salim kashim laguf kahorabot. Rava therefore explains that it means you will be forced to eat food that is harmful to the body, like you're eating a sword. It's all scratchy and bad. What kind of food is that? Coarse grains of salt, hard barley bread, onions. As we learned that dried bread and salt and onions harms the body like a sword. So that's the punishment that you'll have to eat. You'll have nothing to eat. You'll only have this terrible food that will harm the body like a sword. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.